long at Republican Press. I think I stayed for 2 years, and then I moved to another sector until 1999, when I set up a Genuine magazine, which and then the first edition of the magazine came out in 2001. Yeah, the details are there about how the magazine, the details about the magazine. But what is critical to explain here was, initially I paid for the few editions that we printed until we got funding from the MDDA, which was around 2004. So we got funding, we were able to print a couple of editions, but the issue there was the cost of printing a magazine is totally out of order. So we struggled, and then we got a second tranche of funding, I think around 2010. And then we continued a bit, and then I had to stop the magazine in 2013. Fortunately, at that time, I had set up the newspaper, which I started in 2007. So we can move. So in 2007, I launched Intuthuko in Durban. So that one I call Intuthuko Umbumbulu, which is my home area, which is a rural area. And then I moved to Newcastle in 2017. And then I launched Intuthuko Newcastle. And then I set up Intuthuko Dundee in 2019. What I will explain about these titles is they all circulate in rural areas. So you will see the names of the areas where they come, where they are distributed to. Umbumbulu is in my home area towards the coast. Newcastle, the district municipality there is called Amajuba, so it goes there. And then Dundee also moved to Glencoe Fryhead is another area where they circulate. I think when it comes to multiple publications, one would ask, but is it not difficult to set up 3 titles in one, having to run 3 publications in one? I think yes and no. My experience has taught me that because I'm hands-on, I'm able to do a collection of stories, I'm able to do layouts, I'm able to do editing, printing. Only printing is done remotely, and then distribution. So the work for me is not that difficult. And I always tell people that coming from a magazine, this for me is a piece of cake, because I can do layout for a newspaper in one day. It's not that difficult for me to do. And this is how it's been all along. Presently, Intuthuko is running monthly, the Umbumbulu one, the first one. Newcastle is running quarterly. Since COVID, it hasn't been easy for us to publish on a monthly basis. So you find that the last edition we did for Newcastle, I think, was towards the end of last year, and Dundee also around that time. But that's how it is. But the main publication, which I think is sustaining us at the moment, is the first one, Umbumbulu. I combined this slide because I wanted to just point out the successes that we've attained through being in this sector. We always not complain, but we always moan and say, the sector is difficult. We don't have this, we don't have that. But I think we forget that we have achieved in the process. So these are the achievements which I think I would not have attained had I not been in the sector. The working visit to Israel was an experience for us. We interacted with about maybe 30 people from various sectors, business people. I think I was the only one in the media at that time, but I interacted with those, and we visited the whole of Israel. And that was quite an eye-opener for me, because it showed me that there is a world outside the world that I know in my country. And then the cherry on top was 2009, when I was awarded the Dwight Eisenhower Fellowship. for the South African chapter, and it allowed me to visit the US for 2 months, and I got to visit all those publications there and a lot more. I think we went to about 8 states in the 2 months. So that also was the top, one of the best times for my personal life. And I think there I must mention the Hearst building where the O magazine is. I couldn't stop smiling when I went up the escalators there, thinking, really, am I really going to Oprah's office? But I got to meet with Gail because Oprah had just gone out that day. So these are all experiences that one has been through. Oh, and they continue. And I was nominated to be on the board of the AIP. I think I started on the board in 2005, 2007. And 2006, yeah, the following year, they then wanted people in all the provinces, and I joined the AIP board. But at that time, it was just, everything was still difficult. We didn't know what we were doing. But at the end of the day, we were representing our colleagues in the respective provinces. And I'm gonna skip, and then I'm gonna link currently where I'm saying I'm serving as chairperson at the AIP for the second term. In 2007, I was just an ordinary board member. I can't recall the year when I then became chairperson of the AIP, and my term expired after some time, I think around 2014, after you. So after Mahmood, I ran my term, and then I finished. And then AIP went through challenges. One of the main challenges which the organization encountered was when the chairperson at that time passed away through COVID. And there was a vacuum. There was no one who was running the organization. So I was recalled by Duni, and he convinced me to come back and serve for the second term, which is why I'm here now. Otherwise, I would be at home looking after my chickens and doing farming and enjoying myself. So these are also some of the achievements that I've enjoyed over the past years. And then I want to talk about challenges that we encounter as publishers. We know how difficult this sector is. It's not an easy sector. As much as you put in, you still have to put in double the effort. So one of the challenges, I will swap them around. The first one is shortage of advertising revenue, which we all know is how we should be sustaining our publications. It is unfortunately a difficult sector to sustain. We know how it is. When we look at the presentations that we've had this morning, those publishers are mainstream in our heads. At our level, those publishers are mainstream. So when you look at how low our threshold is, then you see we haven't touched the surface.
Except they weren't.
Except they weren't.
They weren't mainstream. They were very small operations to start with.
But I'm saying, Bill, at the level that they are at, yeah, you would say that they look like mainstream, compared to how we are. So I'm just saying the media sector in this country, especially community media, is just way at a higher level. So the second, sorry, if you can go back. Yeah, the other point also is the shortage of funds, which hinders us to grow. And when I'm talking about funds, I just want to emphasize the point of and say, a grant doesn't sustain your business. An MDDA grant funding doesn't sustain your business. I have had 2 grant funds from the MDDA, and what I realized there was you get lazy because you know something is going to come up. You get lazy because okay, I didn't get enough ads this month, but at least I know my printing will be covered. And you don't realize that you have to plan for for the time that the grant is not going to be through. So my point there, through experience, is to say, remember, whenever you are offered a grant, yes, take it, but remember that it won't sustain you for long. Work as though there's no grant in your business. Yeah, and then the other point there is the inability to attract qualified staff to be part of the team. There, I just want to say, scratch that and just work with freelance journalists, work with freelancers as much as possible to save on cost, especially in the environment that we operate in right now. It's difficult, and to have the bill that comes with employing full-time staff is a challenge, and it frustrates. We went through that, where, you know, at the end of the month, besides having to sustain the publications, you now also have to pay, because a person is expecting to be paid at the end of the month. So as much as possible, work with freelance staff. Lessons learned. These are all the lessons that I've learned. Okay, I'm just gonna skim through them. Plan ahead. Yeah, like we're talking about grant. Yes, the grant will be there, but make sure that you do have, you work as though there's no grant. Be hands-on to a limit and know all the aspects of your business. I think this is important, because had I not been hands-on in this business, I would not be where I am today. Because I know layout, I'm able to lay out the publications that I do, and also other publications. So contract publishing I do on a regular basis, and it has assisted me to generate additional revenue. Collaborate with other publishers, yes, like how we're doing. We do have work that we do collectively. And you would think I copied this from what was being said yesterday or on Monday, the importance of running your business honestly and with integrity. Because we you know, if you do shortcuts, it doesn't work. It won't get you anywhere. So be as honest and as straightforward as possible. I listed that one, which says the importance of knowing that I'm the boss. Challenge of delegation. This is a problem I had initially, where I would say, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it. I delegate to someone and they don't perform the task, and then I take over the job. Don't do that. If a person is supposed to do the job, show them how to do the job, delegate to them. And if they fail, assist them in finishing off the job. Be proud of your achievements. I think, colleagues, we are in the US today, and it's not through any magic. It's because we have publications, we have businesses that we are running. So we mustn't be apologetic and say, yeah, my publications are this. No, it's a proper business. I'm gonna skip that one, and then the one which says it gets easier as time goes on. No, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't. I put really there because really it doesn't get any easier. And I think we are here on a fact-finding mission to just find that formula which is going to assist us to make things easier for us and easier as a sector. We asked about the printing press. Mahmood shared his opinions after the presentations and the questions that we had, Aneta. So you look at all those opinions, and then we go back home and we thresh them out, and we find a lasting solution for the sector, because we are a huge sector. We mustn't forget that. And then the last one was, after 10 years, I never envisioned myself being penniless. I thought by now I would be, you know, I would be set, but it's not the case. I'm still working as hard as I can, but I know the publications will eventually get to where I wish them to go. So the question after that is, how do I sustain myself and the business that I'm doing going forward? Sustainability plan. We must change the mindset. I've already spoken about this. Look at yourself as a business. Don't put yourself down. Just walk tall. You've got a publication, you've got a business. So you just be that. Besides the publications that we're doing, diversified, look at other things which are related to your sector sometimes. If not, then do another business which will sustain you so that you are able to continue with whatever you're doing. Build a business relationship with private sector, resale sector and retail sector and all of that. Employ suitable individuals who will help you with your goals. You can't do everything alone, and cheap is not always best. I agree with that, but I think there you can do things on your own because technology has allowed us to learn. I never went to training for the layout that I did. I taught myself. I bought a box in 1999. Actually, I bought a PC. I thought it was a Mac. And then I realized, no, it's not a Mac. You must get a Mac. So I had to go through that and sit right through the night to teach myself to do layout for the magazine. And all those magazines were done by me at that time, And the thing is, when there was no grant, I used to work very hard until the grant came. So I won't go into that story. And then I asked that question to the guys earlier about succession planning. I'm going to be 55 this year. And I'm thinking, my daughter is working, my grandkids are growing up. They won't take this business over. So what's going to happen? It's either I sell these businesses now and look at doing something else. And I've already started informing some of my colleagues that I'm selling the Durban paper for my own reasons. So I think it's that type of planning which we need to start doing now. I congratulate you, Chris, on your son is small, but just remember that the kids that you are raising today are not like us. The passion is not there. They have their own ways. They want to do their own thing. So be very careful, but we must plan how we move on from here. Okay, this is a declaration. The presentation I did in 2010. But as you can see, it still applies today. I just changed the photos and I changed a couple of things, which means I haven't reached my goal yet. But I think whatever I said then, it still applies today and it's still going to apply in future until we get to a solution which will assist us all. So thank you. Okay.
Okay, we have time for a few questions.
How much time?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
It's just a comment.
Thank you, Cecilia, for the
Yes.
second half of the lesson. And just a few questions. Questions. If I'm interested to buy you out, one is saying something for 7. What would you
I will answer you. It's not a,
I don't need to buy it.
yeah, how before making a decision to sell, I had to ask a colleague or a couple of colleagues who have sold a publication like mine. It's also in a rural area. Yes, it's in an affluent area, but she was also in the community media space. And she said to me, she had targeted 300,000 rands for a publication of her size with an age of between 10 and 15 years, with clients, stable clients, circulation and all of that. It was a free sheet. But because they were just wanting to get rid of it because of family issues, she sold it for 150,000 rands. And I think there's no value to a publication. There's no value. The thing which I always emphasize is whoever will take over the publication must make sure that it continues. Because it's one thing to sell a publication and then the next thing you hear it's closed, So whoever is committed, whoever is wanting to purchase that type of business must just be somebody who is, who knows what they will be doing. So yeah, 150. But for you, 200,000. Because I can see you've got money. Yes.
That's good. No, it's just a comment on my side.
I'm glad it's comments.
Yeah, I want to thank you when Mbali, in your presentation, you were just honest. The honesty, especially in terms of this crowdfunding, MTTA's crowdfunding, because I've always been asking why people are not flourishing, whereas they are being given monies by MTTA. So now it is an honest fact that the moment you got the money, you just sit down and let everything go as if, yeah, I'm the boss now, I got the money. So it means, therefore, we need to be serious about the fact that what we are doing is business on the other hand, although we will tell you that it's a service, you know. But at the end of the day, it's business, and it also it's in our hands and minds to make it grow, especially when you've got something like MTTA that is going to inject something so that you can grow and be something else. So that is what I wanted to say. Thank you for being honest, because many of our colleagues have closed, whereas they've received monies from MTTA. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the thing there is that we are not honest to each other. Like, I would not tell you that, yeah, I got grant and then now my business is not working because of which reasons, you know. So yeah, it's very important. And it's important to share ideas about these grants, because they are destroying us. Not to say you mustn't apply for a grant, but somehow there must be a system. I don't know what it is that the MTDA needs to do. Maybe change the way they are granting us, but something has to be done, because all of us are failing once we get the grant.
The conversation can continue, but we do need to move on.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
To that public service mandate that I see. Go, can you do the... So in 1960, so we are 63 years old. It's a fairly old publication. And I've got 1969 Imam Harun killed. Imam Harun was the founding editor of Muslim News. He's the only media person, editor of a newspaper in South Africa, who was arrested, detained, and killed in detention by the apartheid state. No other newspaper can make that claim. None of the mainstream newspapers can make that claim. Today, Imam Harun has been posthumously awarded an order by the state president, I think in 2014. There are streets named after him and buildings named after him. But not many people know that he was our founding editor. In 1986, Muslim Views, the way you see it here, was launched. So it's a change in title. This is Muslim Views. Muslim News was the original name. There's a family ownership issue that caused the name in the change in name. 1993, we did our first Achiever Award, which is an event that we organized at the Cape Town Civic Center. Thousands of people attended, and our special guest, as you can guess, was Nelson Mandela. And we had one of the famous Indian actresses at the time who came from India to meet with him, because she was the head of a campaign for the anti-apartheid movement in India when South Africa was still a pariah state. We relaunched Muslim Views in 1997 to kind of give it the masthead that we currently have. And in 2003, I was awarded a Fulbright Fellowship to come to the States for a year to do a Fulbright Fellowship in journalism at the University of Maryland. And in my absence, well, I was the editor at the time, we appointed a woman as editor. And the interesting story is that she worked for a month and then she left. I was here. I remember in Washington, I was in a hotel and I got a message that Akila is leaving. That's not the interesting part. Interesting part is as you moved up that escalator in Mbali to meet Oprah, Oprah was the one who stole our editor. She offered our editor a job, and so we had to find somebody else to edit the newspaper in my absence. Yes, the O in Cape Town. So, and we were the first newspaper at the time to appoint a woman as editor in South Africa. I think Mail and Guardian makes a claim that Fieril Haffage was appointed 6 months after we appointed Akila. We had our 20th anniversary in 2006. 2007, we joined the AIP, FCJ, PCSA, that's the Press Council, and PDMSA, which is the Print and Digital Media of South Africa. This association here is now defunct. They don't exist anymore. PD, well, yeah, it's print something services. Yeah, okay. We got our ABC certification in 2010. And the last part is a bit important to reflect, in that we transformed into a non-profit because we felt it's better for us to give up our shareholding as directors, earn something for the newspaper that will make it sustainable, as opposed to earning 100% of zero. Okay, this is important because there's a gentleman named John Lloyd in Cape Town. Don't know, anybody heard of him? John Lloyd? You know John Lloyd. John had always said that you need to memorize your mission statement, because you walk into an elevator, you need to be able to throw a pitch. And if you are able to articulate that to your audience or to funders or to people in the network, they realize how serious you are about your game. Next one. I want to say something about our audience and why it's important for us to be able to speak to our audience in a way that kind of characterizes us as a media organization. And I think something about Islam in South Africa is useful to reflect on. We are a very small minority, less than 2%, but over the entire, I think, 27 years now in democracy, we have significant representation in government, in business, and at social level, which enables a media organization speaking to that audience an opportunity to leverage both its audience and the advertiser and the community, the broader community, which is why we don't see ourselves as a Muslim newspaper. We see ourselves as a newspaper that comes from a Muslim community, but speaks to a much broader audience. Although we are guided by our values, we don't project a religious message. So the religious, we don't evangelize. What we do is we speak a message of social justice, of universal values, and of common interests as South Africans. Let's just skip through these slides because it is basically about our audience, and I think I'd rather talk much more about the other slides. Bo, you can just carry on with the next one. Yeah, okay, this one is worth talking about. Islam as a global phenomenon across cultures, nationalities, and races embraces all people. So African Muslims identify with a global community of Muslims, and they embrace a South African national identity. Again, a connection between ourselves and our audience here nationally, but not forgetting that we are part of a global community as well. It's a global community of faith. And in that is both a challenge and an opportunity. But I'll talk about that a little later. Let's skip that one. We're an independent community-owned newspaper that is free from undue influence from government, business, or religious institutions. I think the religious institutions part is very important because we have organizations within our own community that feel they need to pressurize us to speak their narrative, to convey their narrative. But we religiously guard our independence, because very often we find that people threaten us to withdraw advertising, and they have done so. We've done reporting on, let's say, the Hajj industry, which is a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar industry, globally speaking. And South Africa contributes to that budget. And we find that there are operators who do travel, religious travel, Hajj, who advertise with us. But the moment you publish a story that does not go into their favor, that exposes the corruption, then they withdraw the advertising. We've been a victim of that, and we still report on those issues. Although our target audience is primarily Muslim, we respect all faith denominations, and we reflect shared values in our content. Skip that one. I think I've spoken to that already. We strive for relevance and diversity in content by addressing broad social and political issues affecting all people, locally and globally. And I think I want to just reflect on for a moment on the local and global part of the audience that we have in respect of what Bill pointed out on Monday as the sweet spot. And it's a larger vision that we have in the future, but I see that we need to prioritize our local audience first. In other words, a local community. It's very ambitious to speak to a global audience, and it is possible, but I think it would be foolhardy to try to do both at the same time, or to prioritize the global audience in any way. We need to do the local audience first, do that successfully, and once you have a template and a model that works, then we can look at expanding it beyond that point, perhaps with another title or a different platform other than the print one. I think let's skip that because I spoke to that as well. What informs our editorial content, our business strategy, and our audience profile? There are many things that do that, but I think the one important aspect of it is something that it's a word that we all are familiar with. It's called halal. And the halal brand is peculiar to the Muslim faith, but it's also an important global industry. There's a report that comes out annually. It's called the State of the Global Islamic Economy Report. If you go to the next slide, Bo, the value of halal and the food beverage market is $1.17 trillion per annum. That's global. And South Africa has a reasonable share of that. Next one. The halal food and non-food industry is worth $2.1 trillion. Next one. In South Africa, The certification industry is worth 25 million rand, which is the part of the industry that when you go and you do a shop and you see a halal stamp there, that industry alone issuing certificate is about 25 million rand. Next one. The 25 million rand is a measure of Africa's 4 halal certifiers income and not the gross trade value. Next. That trade value is about 220 billion rand. And that's just the foods industry on halal in South Africa. Next bill. A modest estimate of about 0.05%, the 220 billion, places the South African halal foods industry to the value of 1.1 billion rand. Now, for any advertiser, that is an indication of the opportunity, or rather for any publisher, rather not the advertiser. So I think Muslim View sees that opportunity because we happen to be Muslim, but that opportunity is available to all publishers. You don't have to be a Muslim publisher to recognize this opportunity. Next. Most of the large malls in the major cities in South Africa are provided with dedicated prayer facilities for Muslims. Well, and they are dominant, and the malls are dominated by halal certified fast food outlets and restaurants. Now, all of this happened not because Muslims demanded it, it's because market forces demanded it. There's a certain spend that Muslims have in the country that enable them to persuade the property owners of Canal Walk and the other malls in other city centers to invest in this kind of thing for the benefit of a given community. The halal food industry is potentially the most lucrative and unexplored opportunity for community print advertising. Now, I'm focusing on halal because that is one part of what informs our editorial content as well as our advertising strategy. These are some of the brands that advertise with us because they see the value in a Muslim publication that has the kind of reach and has the kind of economic potential for their brands. And they don't sustain us because it's like maybe once or twice a year that they advertise on the important days of the festivals in Ramadan and so forth. But I mentioned a fun fact yesterday, or it was the day before while we were traveling, is that in South Africa, the highest per capita ownership of Mercedes-Benz happens to be a Muslim suburb, Lodium, in the Gauteng province, which is an indication again of the wealth that these people have and where they can spend their money. Next. What do we do at corporate social investment? Our newspaper partnered with a community library way back in the year 2000 to start what is known now as a Cape Town Big Walk. And the Cape Town Big Walk is a partnership basically between our newspaper and Academia Library or the Catesville Library. And we don't make a cent out of this. There's no revenue or money coming from it for the newspaper. We simply get a brand value. In this case, we partnered with the Burger, which is a Media 24 owned publication, in order to give it a wider reach. Next, Bob. And this is the library. These photos don't look so nice because I just pulled them from the internet. But there's a studio facility available where we can actually produce content for the newspaper with these facilities offered by the library. Next. And we have partnerships with 2 radio stations. We've actually published adverts for both these radio stations in our newspaper. And you might have noted from the previous slide also that we have Mail and Guardian as an advertiser. It's again, one media organization partnering with a smaller media organization just to get their brand to our audience. There's one global forum in the world that brings one interest group to one place at one time, the same day of the week, every week, throughout the year, every year, for over 14,034 years. No exception. And that's a very peculiar part of what this global faith community does. It's the congregational prayer. Next one. On a Friday, every Friday. Next. There's just a picture of a mosque, I think somewhere in India. But it's an indication this happens along a single longitudinal line. You're going to skip to the next slide, though. Any longitudinal line, let's take this one here where Cape Town is, on a Friday at 12 noon, throughout the globe, on this longitudinal line, people are at prayer. They physically go to a building, a mosque, and they're at prayer. And that's a physical movement of an audience to one place. That's what you call attention. That's what Facebook does, and every other social media platform does. They seek your attention. Now here we have the physical presence of over 1 billion people on one 24-hour cycle doing the same thing, whose attention you potentially have. And there's an opportunity that I think we still need to configure on how to capture that audience for the purposes of a media organization. God has the attention. How do we get that attention? How do we share that attention? That's an ethical question and not just a financial one or a commercial one. Next. So our distribution model for a print newspaper is quite unique because you're talking about an audience that is faith-based. So the Friday prayer platform is quite unique, and the global and local template ideal for reliability, regularity, and predictability. That's also unique. These are an original 5 bullet points. I couldn't finish my thing because I don't have an internet connection. But we tried a number of things over the years that didn't work. This is one. In 2018, I launched a travel company. Not 2018, actually 2019. I launched a travel company as a means of reaching to an audience that, how much time do I have left for?
You have a minute.
Okay. In order to sustain the print publication, because we believe that print is actually our future. But 2020 came and then the world stopped. So we're going to revisit that one. A special supplement, I've got something here that we did. Quite interestingly, one of the other panel members today said that Israel is 75 years old and they're celebrating all across the world. The Palestinians are commemorating and not celebrating what we call the Nakba. This is an infographic we produced as a special edition, along with a Palestinian that wrote the front page piece, and it was an insert in our last edition. So that's a kind of supplement we want to produce regularly. Events where George Galloway, who's a very interesting British parliamentarian, Ilan Pape, who's a Israeli historian, and Mehdi Hassan, who is now in Washington. He's the reason I'll be here for another week to arrange for him to come to South Africa. We're a non-profit and we've launched our newsletter. And this is part of our strategy of things that didn't work and things that might still work. Thank you. I think this is yours.
Questions or comments from Mahmood?
Hi, Mahmood.
Hi.
You say the religious thing you got your
Independence. How independent.
I know you explained a bit.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the religion and the people in terms of what you're saying and referring to? Because I was under the impression that all Muslims are of the Islam faith. Are they divided within the faith itself so that there is no one who comes in and say, oh, we are fundamentalists or we extreme or, because we hear there are different, categories, So what's the difference? Can one exist without the other?
Can one what exists without the other? I'm not quite.
In the people.
Yes, it's an interesting distinction to draw between the faith and the followers of that faith. The faith is as per the basic texts, the original text, and that is the Quran and the Hadith, which is what the sayings of the Prophet. Those are two primary texts. About that, there is no dispute. The dispute arises between the followers, as in every other religion. You do have your extremists, and then you do have your mainstream. So the mainstream is a group of followers of the faith who stick the closest to the text as possible. It's a very crude and short answer, but yeah, there is a difference. Mbali? Yes. Yes. So a good question, because this is on bond paper, 70 grams, and we had to get sponsorship. I made a few calls within a week, and we got the funds to have it sponsored. People who believe in the cause.
And that sponsorship did it cover printing costs and all the costs and profit for the platform?
We didn't plan to make profit because we did it in order to basically cover the costs and to use whatever surplus there is for the newsletter, which is the other platform that we launched just a week before I came.
Any other questions, comments from Mahmood?
The change to non-profits.
That's a very important question. And thank you for that question. I mentioned that it's better for us to have a small slice of a growing media platform as opposed to 100% of something that shows no potential for growth. So the potential for growth here is that we can now reach out to our audience and say, we are a nonprofit. We strive for independent journalism. We strive for the public interest, and we strive for ethical media practices. And we want you to support us. We cannot legitimately go to our audience and ask for that money. And I think our panel this morning and the previous speakers have indicated, you speak to your audience, you are honest with them, you tell them what you want to do, and you use what we call shared values. Their interests, speak to those interests and tell them, we want to platform you in our publication, so we need you to support it.
So in terms of the registering and nonprofits, would you advise us having publishers to consider that and the benefits and the disadvantages?
The short answer is yes, and I will tell you that being a PTY limited or having a share in a publication where you're a director and a shareholder has only value and merit if you can actually make it work. If there's profit in being a PTY limited, then maybe you shouldn't become a non-profit because you're giving up shareholding. However, you can earn a market-related salary. You can cover all your expenses, and you can plan a whole slew of new projects. If your non-profit can make the kind of money that a for-profit company cannot make. And that's why we switched. But the other important question related to that, and I think we discussed this before, is it possible to secure any kind of interests that the shareholders have in what used to be a for-profit company and it turns into a non-profit? And there again, the answer is yes. So we looked at the Daily Maverick model. Are you familiar with the Daily Maverick? So we went to the Daily Maverick and they were very helpful. And they explained to us what they did. They had an initial entity, which they kept intact. They could form a new entity, which is the non-profit. And that non-profit then has to pay a licensing fee to the original company that owned the title or that owned the business on an annual basis as what they call the IP, the intellectual property licensing fee. And that's how the original shareholders, which sit in another entity, how they can earn the dividends or the fee that's paid from year to year. I just say a very crude description of the kind of model or vehicle that we've created. Yeah. Yes.
The broader audience of the ad needs to understand that.
Yeah.
Work through the and weigh the benefits and the.
Yes.
You know, one of the things Kevin didn't mention about the Cleveland Jewish News is that Cleveland Jewish News it operates as a for-profit company. but it is owned by the Cleveland Jewish Foundation, which is a nonprofit. And so some of the revenue from the for-profit goes into the nonprofit, which does a lot of community development, community support type things. For example, Kevin donated his honorarium for this to the foundation rather than to the print publication.
And that shows a
There
commitment.
There aren't many of those here, but there are some. Lemfest Institute in Philadelphia, you spent time at the Philadelphia Inquirer before Lemfest, is that correct?
No,
Or when Lemfest was running? Oh, no, you were at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Yeah, but it was in 2009, you said? Yeah, that was before Lemfest. So basically, a group of community leaders said, we need to save this newspaper, because it was a for-profit company and it was not being run very well. So the nonprofit is the owner, so to speak, but it's a subsidiary that's been broken off as its own entity. There's also the one in northern Mississippi, near Tupelo, Mississippi. It's a daily newspaper and a few weekly newspapers. Again, a lot of their revenue goes into the nonprofit that owns the newspaper, and the newspaper is operated as a for-profit company. And a lot of the revenue that goes from the newspaper into the nonprofit is used for community development support. They build playgrounds, they support fire departments and things like that. So there is a way to still be a for-profit media enterprise aligned with a nonprofit for a variety of benefits.
that's, sorry, I think Simon had his hand up a while ago.
Mahmood, please, because the South African interchangeability is tricky, please explain between a non-profit company and a non-profit organization. There are two parallels in South Africa. One is a company non-profit, one is a non-profit organization. One is formed by the social development, because it's social development. One is on CIPC. So there are different implications on tech, the implications on how they operate. So if you can just outline things that.
Yeah, I don't think there's much need to explain that, because if you are in business and you are running a company, but you want to get the benefits of what a nonprofit can get in a South African business environment, then you establish a nonprofit company, which is the NPC. So we are now called the Compass NPC. That's the name of the entity that we've created. We're not a nonprofit organization because we remain a business. We're not an organization that is there to do a public service. We are running a newspaper, we are running a business, and therefore we see ourselves as a nonprofit company that is there to conduct business and to earn revenue, which is not called profit, but it's revenue for the organizations, for the company's growth.
But also non-profits do the same thing. It is a thin line, and people, I think you were trying to explain it yesterday.
Well, it's just a bit because one is a business and one is not. That's essentially the difference.
Oh, okay. There are implications of that.
Yeah, there are the nuances, but I think the essential difference is that a NPC is a business. It runs and operates as a business. It is an enterprise, whereas a NPO is an organization that does some kind of service and has the benefit of being tax exempt and so forth.
An existing platform, say, for example, we would look at oil. I mean, the municipal journalism, for example. Is it possible to utilize that in some sort of like, let's say, corporates to fund this entity and to channel that funding to our sustainability?
Yes, it is possible. That is why we became a non-profit.
But us as a newspaper, utilizing another non-profit that's been existing already and forming partnership in good faith.
I think it's a good question. I don't have the answer for it. But if you as a business person who runs a newspaper see the merit and benefit in partnering with the other non-profit organization, I don't see why not.
In spite of us calling ourselves. I remember you mentioned about John Lloyd the other day.
Yes, he's right.
One.
Yes.
Transition.
There's,
Just I mean, on the non-profit, the big difference is non-profits have to have transparent spreadsheets.
that's right.
So all money is going in and out. Obviously are open for public use. If you're a for-profit, you can retain that the confidentiality. However, you do pay different tax. So the bottom line is, when you go to non-profit, you have to be aware that your books can be scrutinized by those people involved with the non-profit.
That's right.
That's what you do. So this thing, so it really helps your work. So let's say, but you want to tap into the corporate around you, and you see there's a lot of mistrust. These people say it's a black newspaper and all that. So if you want to use these corporate, the NPO value rates, and you can support these years. You're trying to corporate funding from the sponsoring with, let's say, public interest journalism.
Yeah.
To support that.
With the proviso that it's transparent. So it has to, the money going in and out has to be available to.
That's right.
The difference is if I have a company, Mahmood, and we have an arrangement and we going to do investment, that's no difference to you. This is my business. No one can arrive and say, I want to see it. But if you're taking non-profit funding, in terms of our law, you have to order that money going in, how much you're paying yourself, what the executive, everything has to be transparent.
Just a quick one. Which tax version do you use on the NPC? Is it the 10A or 18A?
18A, we're applying for 18A.
That's where the
Yeah. That's right.
An NPC can be a public benefit company.
Yes.
Which you are applying for. That's why I was saying South African law doesn't explain that to people, and they abuse people.
It's because they abuse, that's why I don't explain it. I'll give you a little story about that one. So the Section 18A certificate is issued to any donor who wants to get a rebate from SARS. SARS pays you some of your money back if you're giving it as a donation. So we are now in a process, we've already have our MOI, our Memorandum of Incorporation, and all the documentation that we submitted to SARS. So we are registered as a nonprofit with CIPC. But in addition to that registration and our status as a nonprofit, we have applied to SARS for public benefit organization status. And that will entitle us to issue Section 18A certification to any donor who wants to go back to SARS, says, I want some of my money back, which is a benefit, and that's an incentive for people to support us because they're going to get some of that money back. The problem with that is as Simon said, it's abuse. Now, I'll mention a particular type of abuse that is peculiar to the Muslim community. One of the 5 pillars of Islam is called zakah. And zakah is the compulsory tax, charity tax that a Muslim has to pay on his wealth. So that you've got a certain amount of wealth, you include your gold, your investment, all those things that you don't live off to pay for your daily expenses. So at the end of the year, during a financial year, you're required to calculate 2.5% of your excess wealth and give that in charity. Now Muslims do that because it's an obligation, it's a pillar of our faith. And you're not allowed to get anything back. In other words, you give it without any expectation of a reward in this world. Your reward is with God, and He'll reward you on the day of judgment. However, people who pay zakah, they give it to organizations with the expectation of a Section 18A certificate, which means they can go back to SARS and give them their money back. Now, that's perfectly legal, but it's also perfectly unethical, because as a religious donation, you're not obliged, you're required not to ask for anything back. That's just one type of abuse that I think is peculiar to our community, but there's other kinds of abuse that I think you're aware of, Simon. Okay, I think that is it then. I wanna make one comment though. One of the D's in MDDA is diversity. And I think as we are sitting here, we are all very diverse. I'm proud and I'm honored to be among people and publishers who represent all our broad spectrum of community in South Africa. people who work hard, and I've seen publishers running one-person operations from garages, from small rooms, and struggling to make ends meet. And I've learned from them. And I've learned from bigger publishers too. But I think the great value and merit of being an AIP member is to be among you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Expectations for